Welcome to the Base Coat Brainiac podcast. My name is Austin Hauser. I am Chief Brainiac over here at Base Coat Marketing. If you own a painting business and you are listening in today, you are in the right place. So today I have a legend, Nick Slavik. Nick is a husband, a father of four, owner and proprietor of the Nick Slavik Painting and Restoration Company, chair of the PCA, host of Ask a Painter Live, and this man has some of the best facial hair in the painting industry. Nick, you are a busy man. So first of all, thank you for being here today.
Of course. And so greatest compliment ever, legend. But I feel like legend is what they start calling people who are on their way out, as this like gracious sort of thing. So please, I hope that's not an indication of my stance in the industry. I feel like I'm still contributing. So
I see that white hair in your beard, man. I don't know if that's from your business or from the kids, but
well, I can tell you what, it's business. And what's interesting is that I've always been good at growing facial hair. It was a problem when I was in the Army back in the day. And I started up with one little gray patch like 10 years ago. And this last year, it just migrated to the rest. So
I'll get like one or two from time to time and I try to pull them out and then I'm just going to lose my beard entirely. So I might as well just grow into it. Right.
I hear you, man. I'm not going to take this for granted. We're going to let it rock.
I love it. So yeah, Nick, we're here to talk about you today. And as much as I'd love to ask you how human cloning works, because there's no way one man can do everything that you do on a daily basis, I'd actually like to start with your backstory. I think a lot of people know and love the Nick Slavik from Ask a Painter Live today, but many might not know where you've come from. So if you wouldn't mind, maybe take us back in time. How'd you get here today? What's your backstory?
Yeah. And we can pick this apart as far as you want, but the sort of like quick pitch, the elevator pitch of everything was grew up in a painting family in Southern Minnesota here, started at 10, worked for the family business, mom, brother, everybody worked for the family business. I did 4 years of active duty service in the Army right after high school, probably to get a break from dad from painting for a while. And then came back, used my GI Bill to get a college education. Heavy business, accounting, marketing, that sort of thing. And then came back to rejoin the family business. And the old man told me there's no place for you. So I immediately started my own business. That was 15 years ago, the anniversary. I started Ask a Painter about 7 years ago. I've been a member of the PCA for probably 6 or 7 years now. I'm imagining it's 7 years because I think my first Ask a Painter Live was at the request of the PCA. And then I've been a board member for probably 4 or 5 years now and have ascended to chairman of the board of a 140-year-old nonprofit that does the same thing you do, which is builds better contractors.
So good. And I think the reason I wanted to have you on today was I actually see a lot of overlap between our businesses. I look at things like having a framework to build on, right? So we both use EOS, I believe.
Yep.
Our leadership styles, I see a lot of similarity there in the terms of, you have humans on your team that have a culture and get excited to get out of bed every day. And that's not easy, right? So what I want to do is talk about some of these things that I think a lot of people find value in talking about, the challenges that they get lonely because not many people like to talk about them. The ego and your personality get in the way of that. So let's talk about your business. Let's get into the weeds, man. So you mentioned you've started your business 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. You didn't get there from day one. So what did your growth goals look like back then when you were first getting started? What do they look like today?
You're hilarious. You thought I had goals when I started. So I started off with the same goals, Austin, as everybody who's a single owner operator. I'm going to be rich and I'm going to have so much time and this is going to be beautiful. I just can't wait. I can't wait. And you don't really connect that with where you are now and all the stuff you have to do in between. So initially the goal was like, I love painting so much. I'm going to do this. I'm really good at it. I'm really fast at it. I have an endless supply of energy for this. And it just felt like, I looked around at my peer group and not a lot of people like their jobs. And I did. And I was like, I'm not going to take this for granted. So I just went for it. There's sort of like, of my 15-year career, really, you could probably say 10 of it was like unintentional scarcity mindset, regressive leadership. Like I was leading like my father's generation of contractors did. And this is not me talking down to that generation of contractors, but what I know of contracting prior to the year 2000 was basically a bunch of old guys yelling at young guys. And that's all it was. There was
They were
no
awesome.
job descriptions. There's no pay scale. There's no training. There's no safety. I mean, there's just nothing. It's just dads and their sons doing stuff all the time. Fine. It was that way for 80 years. But God, I started leading my business like that and I got horrible results. So, I mean, I had to pivot 6-7 years ago into being a completely different human because that's what the industry demanded.
Yeah. It's leadership, in my opinion, is one of the most important undervalued aspects of running a company. And a lot of people fall short of that. And you've absolutely nailed it. That generation is about being a boss. I think today we look at leadership as being a coach or mentor, somebody that can help you grow. All right. And I think that leads me to my next question is your team. You guys, are you all W-2 employees? Do you use subcontractors as well?
We do. We have this beautiful hybrid and we have the, I come to realize we actually have a triple hybrid model that really nobody talks about, which is full-time, part-time contractors. And so, excuse me, I should delineate those: full-time, part-time, pause, contractors, not part-time contractors. So yeah, we have probably just as many part-time seasonal people, W-2s, as we do full-time W-2s. And then we have probably 10 or 11 trades businesses that we partner with. So it's kind of this triple model. Like I know a lot of people hybridize in some way with, I got 3 W-2s and then I got a whole bunch of subs or vice versa. We kind of have all three, which is cool.
The part-time, let's talk about that because that's something you don't hear much of. I think a lot of guys look at it as you either have full-time W-2s and or subs. The part-time though, I think is very undervalued. Yeah. How did you land on that? What led you down that path?
Yeah. So the theme of my professional life is I do a bunch of stuff. I do it quickly. I fail fast. I try more stuff and I do stuff. And a whole lifetime of that, a 15-year history of that has got me to where I am here. It was very unintentional. It was not all that planned. I didn't have goals and worked up to them. That's only been recent in my company. So what happens early on is I was afraid to hire an employee. So you hire a teacher because a teacher has a job and they have a start date and an end date. And if it doesn't work out, hey, they got another job and they go back to their other job. And it worked out very well. And so then I hired more seasonal people. And then I got in really good with the high school, with the teachers. And then those kids turned into college kids. And what I found out was the cheat code of finding some of the greatest humans on earth between 16 and 23 is find one good one. And he's now your mole. And you tell him, hey, Eric, you like working with your buddies? Bring a few next summer. And he brings 3 of his friends. So it's word of mouth. Selling of your business to potential employees, and it's self-generating. Every year there's another group of people and they all have friends.
I love that so much. And so that's how you go about finding your team, all word of mouth. You don't do any sort of recruiting or posting?
So in the 3 ecosystems, my triple hybridized model, the full-time, the part-time, and the trades partners, each of those are a different recruiting strategy. So for the full-time W-2ers, I do the bread and butter stuff. We're on Facebook, we're Indeed. I still would prefer word of mouth, but eventually you run out of word of mouth sort of contacts and friends and family. So you kind of just have to get out there and do stuff. But yeah, I go out there and hand-to-hand combat in the employment world, just like everybody else. So yeah.
Love it. And I think a lot of people, have an okay time finding a team, but retaining is really difficult. So what does your culture look like? I see you guys do team events, which is fantastic, but how do you retain your team? What does your culture look like?
Yeah. So I think when we say retain, I think we need to, like personally, so I can sleep at night, we need to define that. So retain to me 10 years ago used to be, if you come work with me, this is the only place you're going to work till you die. Turns out that's not a thing. That just doesn't happen anymore, right? Like there is almost nobody except me. I'm the last dude to have one job for the rest of his life. Like nobody else does this anymore. So I think defining that as in, if you can keep a painter for 1 to 3 years, you're probably doing better than average. Most paint companies don't even last that long. So hypothetically, if you just keep them for 1 to 3, you're lasting longer than the normal employee or paint business. What I found out too is that we assume that when people leave, it's because they're bad people or you're a bad boss. And it's always like this movie or novel, like understanding of how that works. I'm an evil boss or I'm a crappy employee. And either one of those is true all the time. One thing that I've found over the years that if you follow the data of who leaves and why, it has a lot to do with something we call MPC, which is mass personal chaos. And it's all the things is circling in that human's life that has nothing to do with me and my business. It's a messy relationship. It's unstable housing. It's a divorce. It's custody. It's debt. It's anything, right? Distance from the job site. And all of those factors weigh in. So when we say retention, there's a very long way around of saying attrition is high in every business. I am doing better than the industry average when I compare it to other painters, but it's still heartbreakingly high. Like still, if somebody stays in my business 3 years, I consider it a win. Doesn't mean I'm not going to set up to capture those people and give them a career for 30 years, but I find out so little is up to me, right?
Yeah. And it's a great point. It's like, even here internally, we have what we call the Core 4 score. And we have this program called the Core 4 program. And it's all about prioritizing your mind, your body, and your relationships before work. If you prioritize those things, work is fine.
I like
and
that.
We ask our team every single week, what is your Core 4 score? What does that look like? Because we don't care just about how happy they are in the job. It's about how happy they are in life, because their job is just one component of that.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I think it's super important.
Well, and something that I've really focused on and been brought to attention to, and it jives perfectly with that, is your gas tank. You have a tank of a certain size and it holds a certain amount of fuel, and you will expend it. And sometimes we expend it all in family and for, neglect our business, and sometimes vice versa. But a professional expends it evenly across those areas, just like you said, because if your family's not taken care of, if your community life isn't taken care of, and you're not taken care of, there's no way you're taking care of your business, and vice versa.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So Nick Slavik Painting Restoration Company, what do your services look like? What's your bread and butter? What do you guys like to focus on?
Residential repaint, Southwest metro area of Minneapolis and St. Paul. Average job size, just around $5,000. Interior and exterior, specialization in historic restoration, and big stuff. Big stuff. We have lots of people who can do lots of things really big. So the flagship of my business is that concierge level buttoned up shirt painter that sweeps up after they're done and can speak to humans there. And that's what we're the most proud of.
And who's your ideal customer profile?
Yeah. So if, probably two ways to answer that. There's the psychological profile and the demographic. And the demographic typically is dual income household, both professionals. Kids are either older or out of the house, living in the Southwest metro. And those people just naturally tend to spend more money on housing improvements and projects and things like that. So that's like, if you look at who we work for, that's the response from the data set. But the psychological profile, what we find is, what I know we don't do is rich people. What I know we don't do is only the people looking for the best. What we don't do is only people who have had bad, experiences with contractors and are really trying to find that one good one. I feel that we cater to slightly experienced clients. So when people hire us, we're typically not the first time they ever hired a home service, which is good. That's what we want, right?
Yeah.
22-year-old understanding what it's like to be a homeowner is going to be pretty surprised by the price which plumbers pay to plunge your toilet and painters pay to paint your house. So we don't necessarily want that. But we also don't get this magical human. Like, we get all these single owner operators across the country that say, I only cater to the rich, the people that only want the best. I don't know that I've ever had a client in 15 years come to me and say, I've been looking for the best painter in the state of Minnesota, and I've endless search and I finally found him. It's still timeline and money.
Yeah. It's not about being the best. It's just about being first.
It's that whole thing. You probably preach about value, which is a whole combination of all of those things. Like, it's not just the best. My data set would prove if I only catered to the people who want the best, I'd have no business. I cater to the people who have decided to stain their deck. They're going to get estimates this week. They're going to make the decision the same week, and they would like it done as soon as possible. That's how people do stuff nowadays. So you can imagine, if you don't have an appointment for 3 weeks, you're already out of it. If you have an appointment this week and you don't give an estimate for another week, you're out of the loop. If you have an appointment and then you never return the estimate, so you can understand why, I think we need to come to terms with the residential repaint world is very transactional. As much as we want it to be like relational and they buy because of us and we're the best, I honestly get this feeling like people decide to paint their house if they can get some quotes easily, if somebody is trustworthy and it's not a crazy price, they do it.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And I think that's where a lot of people love the whole branding aspect of it. And it's really doesn't mean that much in this industry. So let's talk about your target audience, because I know you run into granular detail there, but you're outside of Minneapolis, correct?
You're right.
Do you travel into that actual city, or are you primarily on the suburbs?
No, we do. And, we are in the Southwest. We're 45, 50 minutes from city center. Like if we want to get in downtown Minneapolis and St. Paul, that's where we are. And this is Minnesota, 45 minutes. So we're not stuck in traffic everywhere, right? So we will absolutely do that. We'll go to Summit Avenue and do the Victorian Mansion restorations. But when you look out for your people will get burned out if they're driving an hour and 5 minutes both ways every day. And they can say they aren't until they are, and then they leave. So we always watch out for our people, try to keep them within about 20 minutes, give or take.
Yeah. And then how do you stagger those estimates? Because obviously with a range of your service area being that large, I can imagine that you're going to be driving all over the place. Do you guys have a process for that?
Yes, it's a very humanistic process. So we do on average 36 estimates a week across two estimators. And recently we've been experimenting with how we structure the week with block scheduling. And right now we're in this beautiful experiment where they're in the office Monday. They have 3 days of estimates, 6 estimates each day. And then Friday, half day of cleanup and sort of follow-ups and things like that. And so what we try to do, like in the coordinating of the estimates, is as all the leads come in, you try to stack the days. So there's sort of like 3 areas that we work in. There's north of us, northeast of us, and east of us. And we can start planning. We have 6 days for estimates. We can sort of start planning whenever the leads come in. Oh my God, we did mailers in the east. Or so then all of a sudden I'll start clumping east on one day for one of my estimators. And in Austin, nobody's perfect, right? Yep. Once in a while, I do have the 45-minute trip, but you know what? I just brief my guys. It's like, listen, man, nobody's perfect. It happens.
Yeah. So you're talking about leads. Let's talk about marketing for a moment. I've watched your marketing videos that you do on Ask a Painter Live. I think it's brilliant. But your strategy, I think, falls outside of the typical painting company. And I'd love for you to dive into what that looks like for you today.
Really? So yeah, happily. Then I would like to know how that differs, because I feel like I'm the most vanilla gorilla out there, man. Like just doing basic stuff just consistently. So I think in the past, I do a lot of experiments, right? And maybe that's the thing that's unique about all this, which is I do very intentional experiments. We track an immense amount of data and we try to make decisions quickly. So in the past, what I wanted to happen was me shovel money at something and make leads rain down on top of me. And it either didn't work or there were quickly diminishing returns. Like a little bit of cash would get you something. Scaling that cash would get you less. Like it would just stop at some point. So that led me to reach out to a bunch of people in the industry, collaborate with some people on some of the retreats I do. And we found out that, of course, diversification and consistency does everything. So I think I do 13 different things a week that are little micro touches everywhere. And we just consistently drib drab all over the place. And I think we must tickle the algorithm or something, man. I think they just like activity. I think they like when your website and your Google profile and social media and there's mailers and there's chatter and there's stuff. We do something to get a little better result, but it's still not solved, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So you do a little bit of everything. You do both digital and offsite marketing. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know, what's interesting is that, the latest data, if you look at maybe just the 3 quarters of this year, anywhere between 25 and 40% on average of my leads come in through word of mouth, repeat, and referrals. Anywhere between 25 and 40% come through flyers I send out in the mail. So if you want to think that I got some crazy app or algorithm, I'm doing the 2 things that are the oldest forms of marketing, which is humans talking to each other and mailing stuff to people. And Austin, I do not want that to work, but it works.
So whenever I was talking about you having a rather unique marketing strategy, that's exactly what I was referring to.
Okay.
A lot of guys out there grasp at those shiny objects, which in this day and age is the digital marketing realm, right? Facebook ads, Google ads, the local services ads, anything out there that we typically do. But there is something to be said about putting a postcard in the mail and getting it in somebody's mailbox. So I am curious. So your postcard mailing strategy, what does that look like? What's your close rate? What's your book rate look like on that?
Yeah. So I'm gonna try to recall specific numbers, but I can tell you this. it's disgustingly low, just like everything else. It's like it works and we can make it work. And I'm actually hitting, I think right now we're probably at about I think between a 4 and a 5% marketing budget for the year on a $3 million business. So, I mean, it is working, but the open rate and the success rate is so low, man. But it's on average with that. So I think, again, I've done all the experiments. Last year, we went the heaviest we ever did. We were probably doing 20 to 25 grand a month in flyers out to people like that. And we just hit the diminishing returns for that period right there. We capped out the system. It was very like blunt shotgun effect. And this year it's way more refined. We're more sophisticated with it. We're a little more consistent. And we took down our spend 3x lower, 300% lower. And I think we only dropped off 10% less leads than we did last year. And now that's less leads in the EDDM, but now we just transferred it over to 10 other little things that we do. Some are effort, some are relational, and some are money too. But we found that just taking the same amount of money and dispersing it between 10 to 13 places gets you a better result than 2 shovelfuls of cash into 2.
Agreed. And you mentioned low close, low open rate over there, but your ROI is still justifiable on that one particular channel where we're looking at postcard mailers, correct?
Yeah. So this is, the beautiful data and the feelings thing. The feeling things, like you want to grab a pencil and snap it in your hand every time you realize for every 5,000 you send out, you get like 12 estimates, but at the same time, it's like, but it's reasonably cost and I can get 12 estimates,
Yep.
And so you're like, at some point you want it to be a 1-to-1. You send 10 postcards, you want to get 10 estimates, but that doesn't happen for everybody.
Yeah, it's a numbers game. So outside of word of mouth postcards, do you also do door hangers as well?
Yeah. So this is our first year of experimenting with door hang. Well, I shouldn't say that. We've done guerrilla forms of marketing where humans do something other than a door hanger to deliver it, but not in a mailbox. So you're sticking it to something or hanging it from something and that. And again, that's effective, but now you have a human involved and that's expensive, dude. That's labor.
Yeah.
So, so we're trying out door hangers. We have identified about 13 different neighborhoods in a town close to me where we're starting our first experiments. And I think we've done one chunk so far, one quadrant so far. And I mean, the return is not great, but it's our first experiment. So just like when we started with flyers, I think it was probably 6 months before that stuff even statistically showed up on my radar. So
yeah, it takes a while. And one thing we actually noticed with door hangers in particular is making them personalized. You leave that little white block on there, write a little handwritten note about a promo you might be running right now. That tends to generate a little more eye-catching movement there.
I like that.
So yeah, I got a bunch more where that came from, but
Austin, my guys are probably going to hate to hear that because guess who's getting some Post-it notes and some pens next week, and everybody's going to be scribbling little personal notes everywhere.
They work. It's brilliant, right? So okay, we're talking about getting leads in now. Let's say you get some estimates on the calendar. What does your sales process look like whenever you actually go out to that prospect's house?
Yeah, so this is one of probably the 2 years ago, this was probably the most developed system in my business. It's probably now the second or third most developed system in my business, just because we haven't, modernized it in any great way. So we either do something genius or the stupidest thing you could do sales on earth, which is we are fairly passive. We're Minnesotans. Like we're passive aggressive, man. We don't like eye contact. We're a little introverted, that sort of thing. So we're not out there standing in their doorway saying buy or die. Like that's not the culture of my company. So what we want to do is we position ourselves as the guides and not the heroes. That's sort of the ethos we go in. We assume that every question is basically the client asking, are you going to take advantage of me? And in the end, if we are the guide and we are helpful and we've proven we won't be taking advantage of them, I feel that our SR goes up. And we do have a pretty rigorous follow-up thing, but it's passive follow-up. It's a friendly phone call and a voicemail saying, hey, appreciate it the other day. It's really great to meet you. Maybe mention something personal and then followed up with an email. And that consistency brings in a lot of work because I think the last stat I looked at, only about 10% of our estimates close same week. So really? Follow-ups are huge, man. Yeah. It's alarmingly low how little we sell on the spot, but data and feelings, my guys are out there giving $18,000 estimates for trim on the main floor of a house. I would assume that that spouse would like to talk to the other human in that house before they say yes the same day. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, give me an example of somebody who's asking you a question to make sure they're not being taken advantage of.
what kind of paint do you use? All these, like, literally, this is a thing that I thought about so much, because when you think about, yeah, okay, that example, what paint are you going to lose? I go down a rabbit hole here because this is one of these weird things that, like, we fixate on here in my company, which is it could, I do know this from the data. Like, I did 800 estimates a year myself for a decade. And so I have the data set here. My clients don't care about paint. Like, they literally just don't care about paint. They don't care about the brand.
Nope.
Once in a while, you get somebody say, I got an uncle who used Sherman-Williams years ago, and he really liked it, so I want you to. And it's like, well, you don't know anything about that, you know? They don't care about paint. What they're asking you, what they really want to ask is, I've lived in this house for 8 years. It's a brand new construction. They use builder's flat. My kids marked up the walls. When I go to wash the walls, the paint comes off in the rag. When I ask what paint you're going to use, what I'm really asking is, are you going to use builder's flat again? I'm going to pay $9,000 to get the walls of my house done, and then I'm going to get this same paint again. Like, when you think about, when are you going to start? What they're really asking is, if I give you a down payment, will you start? You know, and that sort of things. And so every single question, when you think about it like that, you as an estimator or a salesperson will change how you answer it. Now, if you answer every time, well, listen, we use Sherwin-Williams Emerald Matte because matte has a degree of shine of 25 when the flat really has about a 5. Now, if you step up to a satin, it's got a degree angle of shine of about 45. And in my testing at home, I found that this isn't any more washable. It's just shinier. And then it shows that you like, and meanwhile, the client's just like, all right, dude, can you just be quiet? I have a next question, right? You know? So
Education.
That's how I think about it.
I love it. Yeah. And we do the same. When we look at selling, it's all about educating your prospect, right? I mean, the days of hard selling, like a car salesman, I know Tanner and I talked about this a bunch before, that those days are over, right? People see right through that nowadays.
People like us, man. I mean, literally, I don't want phone calls.
Yeah.
I don't. And if somebody drives down my driveway, I live on a farm. If somebody drives down my driveway, my family will come outside. Like, the days of going door to door and that version of sales out in the country, the day of calling and things like that, it's like, it's people like us don't want that. We want to go to your website and schedule online and things like that.
Yeah. And I think, even just tying into the different buyer personas, I mean, the younger generation, they love just texting and going online, booking without even talking to somebody, having somebody show up at their house. Having to cater to all that, I think, is really important. And I think you've nailed a really important point, which is reading between the lines. Just because they're asking you a question doesn't mean they actually care about the answer to that specific question, right?
Yeah. And so it's a really interesting discussion that I love having with painters, because almost every business owner is an estimator and salesperson too, just naturally, right? They're typically not integrators and project managers and things like that. They're way more better at sales. So one thing I like talking about is pre-qualifying versus the psychological needs of the client and all this other stuff, because a lot of times we delude ourselves into thinking that we can profile a client. We know what their needs are. We know exactly what this is. Like, what, from a website inquiry? Like, I know that people teach this and preach it and things like that. And I know some people that are successful. In my company, we don't pre-qualify anybody. Like, as far as we can tell, if you're not a crazy person and you're asking for something we do in our service area and you agree to an estimate, you're in. Like, we don't, I have never found an effective way to assess a budget, right? Like, I've never found an effective way. So it's one of those things where I talk about finding the psychological needs of the client, not by trying to figure out what that client needs, but assuming that all clients just don't want to be taken advantage of by bad contractors. I overlay a profile on top of them, and it turns out to be a great strategy.
So your pre-qualification process sounds very thin. Is that an accurate assessment, or do you have?
Dude, we need 36 to 45 estimates a week. Like, so here's the question. This is the debate. And I know that people love pre-qualifying. I will tell you this. If I were a single owner operator, I would pre-qualify too, because I wouldn't need half the calls that come in. That is a luxury to pre-qualify people.
Yeah.
With this business, I go out of my way to spend somewhere between 3 and 10% of $3 million a year in order to get people to call me. That is the pre-qualification. You have shown interest in my company, right? Yep. I go out of my way to find these people. So I am way if I went down to a single owner operator, I would probably turn away 90% of the people. I would triple my prices, and I would have a year's full of work right now, the way this industry is going.
So, okay, you still do estimating sales? No, you have an estimator and a salesperson, correct?
Two of them. Yep.
Okay. So let's talk about that, because I feel like that's one of the last things that any business gives up, right? Their sales. That's their bread and butter. That's how they started the thing. They can give up production and all that. But at what point did you hire a salesperson, an estimator, and what did that process look like for you?
Our business was 1.7, 1.8 million. And I was doing all the sales in 3 afternoons a week. And just like most business owners, we delude ourselves into thinking we're superstars at this, but really we've just found a really good way that authentically sells. And our SR is through the roof compared to standard estimators, and our name's on the company. So we have this like cheat code with the clients, right? So yeah, we were at about 1.7. I was selling all of it and it was fine. But sooner or later you realize like, okay, I'm going to need 5 afternoons of estimating, but then now what with that extra time? So it was pretty clear to me that like, when people ask me when to do it, that's extreme, right? Taking it that far. But that's been the strategy in my business for me to do more roles than I need to, so that when we hire that overhead, it's an immediate relief to the entire system. So I would say minimum, if you're running a very profitable company at $1 million, you can probably afford your first big overhead, maybe an estimator, maybe a project manager. At 1.5, that's when you can afford to pay a really good estimator, right? I believe a residential repaint estimator should sell over under 1.5 to 1.7 in res repaint work, give or take that $4,800 to $6,000 AJS, something like that.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I think tying into that, I am curious, how do you train your salespeople? Like, do you guys have unique selling points? Do you talk about your competition? I know you don't have a scarcity mindset, but what does that look like whenever you actually get them out on the field?
Yeah. Interesting data point too, from 800 reps a year for a decade is, anytime you bring up the competition, you don't look good. If it just, there's something, I see the look at clients' eyes when you talk about another painter, it just, the proclivity for that to go sideways or them not to look good at you is very high. So we just don't do it. We don't do it at all. Our sales process is our training process. That's what you asked. So our training process is actually almost simple to a point of like bewilderingly simple. So we have a price Bible. We have probably 37 different things that we keep a standard price for. And this is built off of mountains of data over the years. We did 3D models of every house we estimated for 3 years. I grabbed all the linear square foot, everything else. We tracked prices. We compared it to job costing. And we came up with what I would consider as far as we can tell, a market rate for my company. So a market rate to me would be the highest price you can sell it for while you're filling up a calendar. And when you produce it, it can produce profitably. And so we take this price Bible with our 30 to 40 different standard things that we track. And then I make picture books. So it's when it says we have, we simplified I'm being long-winded, but the simplest example of this is internally, we hilariously call it the children's book. It's pictures. It's literally, we have 6 different types of exteriors, give or take, and they each have a price attached to it, and they each have a square footage attached to it. So literally, you can take a 5-page book and take somebody who's never estimated. We can walk up to any house in our thing, and I say, Jim, open that up and point to the picture of the book that looks closest to the house, and they're already 90% close to the number. Then they just have to take into account prep, landscaping, and things like that.
Old school. I love it. Hey, it works though, right?
It works, and it works with the personality of our company, right? Like one of my best friends in the industry has one of the most robust data-based bidding systems where they literally measure every inch of the house and come up with a system on a monster spreadsheet that fits the personality of his business. For me, I understand that this is a lot of disparate things here. So it's a transaction, so it's less personal, but also we have to gain their trust and prove that we're not going to be taking advantage of them. Then we have to be professionals, but we can't be pushy and try to sell. So it's this weird tightrope of like just going all in, looking them in the eyes, leaning in and things like that versus just standing back. And sometimes you stand back too far and you're too passive. So it's one of those weird things. So the reason I came up with like this insanely simple system is that I just want my people to focus on the conversation. Like, I literally think the tone, the warmth, the flow of the conversation is as effective as what you say to put those people at ease and actually sell a job.
Yeah, I mean, you've nailed it. And I do want to back up to one thing you mentioned there,
Yeah.
and that is your competition. So
Yeah.
this comes up, I know it does, for other people. And what'll happen is somebody will say during an estimate, "Hey, I spoke with so and so, and they gave me this quote. What makes you better?" And I'm sure you guys have had that same question asked to you. How do you respond to that?
Interestingly enough, I cannot point to one instance where somebody actually made us justify why we're better.
Really?
If I'm being honest, our data set would point to those people don't care. They see that lower estimate as apple and apple to us. And we get a lot of response, not asking us to justify our price, but almost being disgusted because we're 20% more than the other person. You know, they're almost taken aback, like almost offended. And yeah, typically what we get, and which my estimators hate more than anything, but love at the same time, is, my God, you guys are professional. You were out here the first. You gave us an estimate on site. You were awesome. You explained everything. The problem is the other person's 21% lower, and we don't care. We're going with them.
Yeah. And look, if it comes down to price, they're not the right client for you anyways, right?
Well, and you know, it's weird because I think when if you would have pulled me aside as a single owner operator, I would have said, Nick sells it all. It doesn't matter what I say. I'm just the expert and I love it. And it's my personality that sells it. Well, it turns out it's price and timeline first, and then maybe the trustworthiness of the client. Right. And
Yeah.
I think clients will honestly weigh, like, if there's somebody who's half our price, which does happen, honestly, they're looking at it like, they start at the same time and one is half the price. I see the benefit in half the price, you know? And I think there's just enough Nick Slaviks in their first year that will be half the price and still do an okay job out there, that they're kind of willing to gamble. And if I'm being honest, I would too. You know, if it was a high probability, yeah, you don't go to the bargain lot to buy a car, right?
Yeah.
Because that's hysterically bad that it's a cliche, you know. But what would be nice in our industry if the painters who were very unprofessional, and I'm not talking the guys who charge less because they don't know, I'm talking the crooks in our industry.
Yeah.
I would like the low price painter to be the used car lot of the contracting world, where that has a stigma that cannot be overcome.
It's a great analogy, and I'm definitely going to steal that. It's fantastic. So you brought up a good point, though, that I want to also touch on, is the fact that your business has your name on it. And unlike most business owners, you know, that just, you know, Joe Schmo is painting, I've checked your Google profile and you have over 200 reviews, and not all of those are 5-star reviews.
No,
So
not at all.
what I want to ask you is, how do you manage the burden and stress of an unhappy customer leaving you a negative review with a business that bears your name?
Yeah, so this is interesting. I am growing a callus to it. I lived and died by the happiness of others years ago. I still kind of do, but I'm getting better. I'm intentionally working on that. It's a healthy thing to do as a human. But my team does. One of my estimators is mentioned by name in 2 reviews. The interesting thing is, we had a client recently who was a very forceful personality, just big, bold personality. And she actually brought up, she's like, so I read your reviews and I see you have some negative ones. And actually, estimator, your name was brought up twice. And what my estimator did was really great, which is, oh, interesting you would bring that up. We actually have a 4.8 rating. We have 230, 223, 230 reviews right now. And if you look at the 6 1-star reviews, 3 of those people we've never worked for. We don't know who they are, and they left a 1-star review and we can't get them removed. 2 of them that mentioned my name, we never actually worked for them either. We gave them a free estimate. We couldn't meet their timeline. And so then they got mad and left a review. So really what we did for them was we gave them 3 free hours of a professional's time. And because we couldn't do it the next week, they were angry at us. And so when our estimator looks that person in the eye and say, yeah, you can give us a 1-star review for that, we never touched your house. And in fact, they're ahead by 3 hours of our labor. We donated to them. So if you think we're bad people, if that's a bad person, we don't want to be good.
It is such an unhealthy thing, and we all fall into it, and that is relying on the happiness of others to make you happy, right? It's impossible to make everybody happy.
I will tell you this, as far as I know, like from Minnesota, it's tough for us to brag about anything, right? It's tough to call ourselves snowflakes. We don't think we're special, almost to a fault. I can tell you, I am very special. To a fault, I lived and died by the happiness of others. And I'm still recovering from this, right? I'm working intentionally 3 times a week to get over this now. But I am the most extreme version of that of probably anybody you'll ever meet. So I set up a system where my first and last name is on anything. And I set up the worst possible system you could for that. But it did make me grow some calluses though, too. What I'm seeing now is my team is going through that same process as I did when their name gets mentioned in a review. And it's great because I'm on the other side of it and I can help them now.
Yeah. I mean, mindset's so important. And I preach that over and over. Like, scaling a business, you can do that with skills, but if your mindset is not right, it makes that so much harder.
No, exactly. And, grit will get you to the top. The core values and the consistency and presentness of its owner is going to be what keeps you there and takes you farther.
Totally. So let's talk about mindset for a moment, because I think, again, that's one of my most important things that I focus on here within Base Coat Marketing. And that the mindset that takes you from 0 to 500 or 0 to $1 million is going to be different than what you need to go from $1 million to multi 7 figures. What did that look like for you over the last 15 years?
Yeah. So, I mean, in the early stages, like 0 to 500K or 0 to $1 million, it's basically just like SOPs, job descriptions. How do you hire people? How do you sell? How do you produce a job? It's like just basically perfecting your proven process. Like, so you can look a client in the eye and just get it down. A lot of people will get there to the $1.5 million, sometimes even 2, and that's still in their head. And then magically problems come up because nobody has this document to reference, this employee manual or a standard operating procedure. So really, like, the focus is that job costing and that. Now, if you've made it past 1.5 to 2 million, and you've been doing it for more than a few years, it's likely you have those systems in place. Like, I don't know many cowboys who can stay there at 2.2 million with nothing written down for all those years. If they are exceptionally talented humans who work 1,000 hours a week, right?
Yeah.
That's the way I've seen that work. So then all of a sudden it's this weird shift to where you can read it in Traction. You can read it in any major business book. Eventually you'll find some line that says the businesses that do accountability the best win. And accountability is the thing that humans hate the most.
I actually have that book right here. In fact,
there is literally, like, I wore out a highlighter on the page where it's the most unsatisfying, stupid line you'd never want to see in a book, but it's literally, it'll say, if you do accountability good, you will win over all else, And so that's the thing, that accountability isn't once a year saying you did a crappy job, I'm not giving you a raise, do better next year. Accountability is 27 touches a day of micro accountability so that you can create a culture that accountability becomes part of it. So shifting, okay, I'm long-winded.
Yep.
I will come back to this, but the hardest thing on earth right now, I might be entering the most difficult professional period of my life of trying to switch from cowboy to that consistent manager all the time. And I'm trying to do it intentionally. It's not easy. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done. If I could go back to learning what job costing was or SOPs or how to train somebody, that's old hat to me. That would be a cakewalk for me now. I'm literally trying to change my personality. This historically doesn't happen, that the founder, grower, scaler then becomes the professional manager or CEO or integrator of a company. Those two personalities don't exist. So honestly, there's a complete shift in mindset that has to happen. And if you can't do it, I'm trying to do it myself, which is not a wise task, I've been told. You got to find somebody who does. And that's tough, man.
Yeah. Nick, I'm going through the exact same thing, man. Like, just a handful of years ago, I was still building websites and running ad campaigns. I have a team of 25 today. We're looking to double in size over the next year or two. And it's tough. It's tough.
You're in it, then, man. We're there together. It's like, you need to be a completely different human, because if you come in as a firefighter in your office and you got 25 direct reports, those people are scared, dude. They do not want a firefighter. They want that person who's there 7 minutes before them, has the coffee break of the same day, has just enough small talk in there to build rapport, does daily one-on-ones with everybody. If something's wrong, they address it immediately or create a process, and then they go on with their day consistently every day.
Yep. Build leaders. And yeah, I mean, it's challenging. And I think you've nailed it when you're talking about changing your entire personality, having that same repetition to your daily habits. Yeah. That's been a game changer for me. I wake up at 4:30 every morning. I work out, meditate, spend time with the family, and then I get to work. I already got 3 wins for the day. I mean,
Yes.
that's hard to beat, right? But it does not, that's hard to get there. And many people don't have that kind of dedication, and it's tough.
Well, but it's believing in the system, like it was at core 4.
Yes.
Yeah. So like you said, you're already taking care of some of the most important things before you do that. The problem is, can you trust that system enough? Because when I wake up in the morning, and almost everybody else in the industry, we're thinking about that one client who's upset, or that job costing that needs to be done, or that estimate that we didn't turn in. And it's tough to meditate or to work out knowing that there's stuff to get done. So that literally is the hardest thing, to just trust the process.
It's so hard. I didn't learn that by myself. As you mentioned, you hire people smarter than you are to learn from them. And that's, if there's one life hack I can ever recommend, it's doing that, is investing in yourself. So important.
Yep. And accountability partners are great.
Oh, totally. Without a doubt. And I do want to touch on the PCA at that point as well. But a few other questions for you here. When we're looking at things that maybe keep you awake at night, because every business owner has that, right? I mean, I know there's times where I have trouble sleeping, and it's because of something in the business. What does that look like for you?
It's me letting my people down as a manager and a leader, right? So what my people deserve is the most inspirational, boisterous, fun, happy, optimistic, just effective leader they can get. And I'm not that, right? There are very few people that are that, but my people deserve it. And I try for it every day. So literally, when I bolt up out of bed with sweat, I always think, like, what could I have done? Is there something I need to do that I'm not seeing? How can I be better for these people? Because I know that's what I would want.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And what motivates you, Nick? Because again, you are a busy guy. You travel around, you're at the PCA, you're doing these, is the Ask a Painter Live, that's every single Saturday. Is that correct?
Yep. Every week. It's been going for 7 years. I never missed a date.
So you never missed a Saturday for 7 years. You got your painting business, $3 million, 15 years going into it.
Yep.
What gets you excited to get out of bed every day? What keeps your mind in the right place?
Yeah, I think two parts of this, which is, for most of my life, it's been the happiness of others in an unhealthy way, right? Like, that can lead you to do great things. It can also lead you to completely neglect other things, my family mainly, and community and friends and things like that. So while I should even say yourself too. I was with a accountability partner this week, and they made me remind me of the question right after this. All right. They made me make a list of the things that I really needed to work on for 2024. And I was coming up with just areas of my life that we should have goals in. What I did not even consider putting on the list was myself. And they were just like, are you kidding me? You have 9 areas of life. You didn't even mention yourself. I'm like, well, that's pretty egotistical that you'd be like, well, what? I'm tough. I can take it. They're like, dude, if you are the car and you're broken down, you're not getting to any of these other locations. Like, it's just not going to happen. So yeah. This is what I worry about. When I bolt out of bed in the middle of the night with sweat, I worry about that. I didn't even consider it. And it might be the most important thing.
Well, it's having those people, again, who have already walked in your shoes or who have an outsider's perspective that I really feel like give you that insight that you're like, holy shit, like, how did I miss that? And it's those kind of people who help you avoid those roadblocks that otherwise you would have run directly into, right?
That's it. And so the system is, you don't have to know everything. You have to know a system to know everything. And if you know enough Jason Paris's around the world and things like that, and especially connected to the PCA, there's somebody there that knows it. So as long as you have that Rolodex of people you can call on, that's the system. Yeah,
totally. Couldn't agree more. So, Nick, I got a few other random questions for you here, and then I do want to touch on the PCA as well. Yeah. So, what's your favorite music? What do you like to listen to? You got a favorite artist out there?
Yeah. So here's the deal, man. I got this Spotify playlist that's got 800. I keep this up on my desktop here, and I go hard in the office, and there's 818 songs on there. And what happened was, when I was a kid working with my dad in the painting business, we listened to the most famous classic rock station in the upper Midwest. And as a kid, you learn about Led Zeppelin, and you learn about, Lynyrd Skynyrd, and your mind is the Doors, and your mind's just exploding with what is this crazy music. And then you listen to it for 15 years, and pretty soon I can't listen to another Lynyrd Skynyrd song again in my life, because it's a great music. I can't listen to it. So now my life is full of the most random stuff you would ever get. Perfect example is at my last retreat, the summer retreat I did. We take a midnight pontoon ride out in the middle of the lake. It's perfectly dark, no lights. We got the cooler, we got the music going there, dark, stars, canopy of stars above us on a wilderness lake in Minnesota. And I go around as a captain of the boat of each person and say, this is our jukebox tonight. You're going to pick a song. And when you pick a song, I'm adding it to my Spotify playlist. And then the next person. So I walked away with 30 new songs, and it's punk music from the 80s. It's deep trance music from Germany. It's a 70s soul tune. And you're just like, I put those on repeat. I'm still listening to the retreat music.
It's amazing. We actually just pulled our team today. We had a company huddle, and we asked that same question. And Taylor Swift came up for like 30% of the people on my team. So you can't hate T Swift. And I actually just found out that the Rolling Stones released a new album, which I need to listen to apparently. Yeah, I know. They're still releasing albums. Yeah, that just came through on my Spotify email the other day. So
I have been to the Barbie movie. I have been to a Taylor Swift concert. I have 2 young daughters in my house. So yes, they add stuff there. And all we do is hear Taylor Swift and karaoke songs in the house. I'm very well acquainted.
Love it. So good. And Nick, what do you enjoy doing outside of work? I see you posting some hunting pictures from time to time.
Yeah. So it's hunting. Hunting is like, that's kind of what people notice, but really for me, it's outside stuff. And, it's easy to take notice of the ones where I'm holding weapons and stuff, but I kill like 2 things a year randomly, like I'm not out there, ravaging the countryside. For me, it's being outdoors and then having my kids outdoors too. And when I was a kid, not a great childhood, not an easy childhood. But what I remember is the wilderness. And for all the flaws and foibles of the people older than me, they did center my life around wilderness. And I find not only peace, like energy. I'm in the woods. We're looking for puffball mushrooms, or we're finding a red squirrel instead of a gray squirrel, or we're just seeing what's over that hill. And I'm literally like, my heart is racing. And so that to me is like anything like that, man.
We were just out in the mountains of Western North Carolina a few weeks ago, and my boys ripped off their shirts, grabbed a stick, and went running out into the woods like Huckleberry Finn. And I have never had the biggest smile on my face before that. So completely relate to that.
I have one of the, I was recalling this to somebody from Tennessee the other day, but I was stationed in North Carolina in the Army for a while, and I attempted to drive to Tennessee to Pigeon Forge with a paper map. That's dating me. That's quite a bit old. I had a 2-wheel drive pickup truck with crank windows. GPS wasn't a thing. I think I just got my first cell phone. There was no electronic mapping. We had a paper map. I got so lost in the hinterlands in some Tennessee, Western North Carolina mountain. It was literally a single track. If I went for 2 hours on this single track, if I would have met another truck, I would have had to back down 2 hours.
Yeah, we were driving out there through some of those mountains up 50% grades. And fortunately, we had my wife's electric vehicle down there. I'm like, this is going to work, right?
It was beautiful. Wooden shacks with smoke coming out of a smokestack. It's one of the most magical places on earth, man.
It's beautiful out there. We love it. We're very fortunate to live in a state that has both the ocean, the warm weather, and the mountains out there.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, Nick, I have one last question for you, and that is your greatest insight. So, as a business owner and a human, I'm looking for something that you can impart on those listening in, something that'll help them on their journey or help them find more success within their business. If you had to scream one thing from the rooftop, what would that be?
It's not fair. It's just not fair. As a business owner, you're going to have to take more of the burden, more of the risk, more of the blood, more of the sweat, more of the tears. You're going to have to be happier than everybody else around you. You're going to have to be more optimistic. You're going to have to be more empathetic. You're going to have to be more understanding to the point where you feel like everybody's taking advantage of you. But when you do all that stuff for a very long time, you reap all the rewards of that.
It's perfect. And I do want to touch on something else that we had brought up here, and that is investing in yourself. And I think the PCA, in my opinion, is a big part of that. And the people at the PCA, I was out there in Albuquerque this past year. I'm excited about Orlando in February. And the people there are just amazing. And can you tell us a little bit about the PCA and maybe how somebody listening in on this can join and why they should join?
Absolutely. So if you'll notice right here is a cutout head of Jason Paris. That is from you from the last expo. That is a little thing we snuck into my suitcase and we have fun with every once in a while. So no, the PCA Expo is our Super Bowl, man. I mean, that's like, In the past, we've had anywhere between, 500 and 800 people there. We're swinging for the fence. We're trying to get even more than that this year. It's going to be in Orlando. It's a family destination, super family friendly. I know people are coming sometimes a week prior or a week after with their families and stuff. And it is literally, podcasts are important, right? Ask a Painter Live is important. It's great, but it's never going to be like in person, man. And we all know this now after this time of COVID. Like, yes, we can be effective working from home and listening to podcasts. It will never replicate the conversation that you and I had at last Expo, ever. There's just something magical and different about it when you're in person. So imagine 800 of your people from all over the country, 600 of them probably doing it way better than you and far advanced, and 300 of them going through your next phase that you're going to be going through in the next 6 months, who will gladly give you everything they own and get on a weekly call with you and help. And in fact, the proof of all this, like, yes, the education is going to be wild. The trade show is going to be awesome. You know how good that is. The parties are not. We don't even advertise those things. That might be the main draw of the whole thing. We had a party. We had $150,000 party on a pirate ship a couple of years ago. Like, dude, it is insane, right? But back to friendship. We can have connections. If you and I only knew us from this podcast, that'd be great. I would call you an acquaintance, maybe even a friend. But until we've stood in the same room and actually pressed the flesh and talked in person, talked about families and what we like and stuff like that, you can't ever call yourself a friend. This summer, for the first time in my professional 15-year life, I actually called somebody and asked for help. Both of those people were from the PCA, and they came through like nobody else ever has in my personal or professional life. They didn't have to. They did it for free.
Yeah, and that's exactly. It's the people who are giving their value and insight. It's those hallway conversations. They cannot be undervalued. I cannot tell you, I have plenty of mastermind groups and conferences I go to on the marketing side.
Yeah.
And I get way more value out of walking out of that conference room and talking to somebody in the hallway than I do sitting in a chair.
Austin, I have joked, half joking, half serious, that I was going to make the industry get together that was only hallway stuff. We'd put drinks and stuff out there, and we'd have all the conference room labeled, and we'd say, starts in 3 hours, give or take. And literally everybody would stand in the hallway and drink sodas and talk to each other.
That's all you need, man. It's just a community of awesome people. And I think that's
exactly.
nailed it.
And then we eventually would go to dinner.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Well, Nick, I am looking forward to seeing you in person down in Orlando. Thank you again for your time on this Friday afternoon. If you guys have any questions, reach out to Nick on social media. He's very vocal and on it. And Saturdays, what time are those Ask a Painter Live events?
Yeah. So, all right, here's the deal, man. It's my pirate ship and it sails when I want. So it's kind of one of those, like, in the summer, it's variable because I want to spend time with my family. It's typically I fall into a nice pattern in the winter of Saturday or Sunday morning, give or take your 9-10 o'clock when you wake up. So, yeah.
Awesome. Nick, thank you again, brother. Talk to
Anytime,
you soon.
Man. This is awesome.
Cheers.